At 12:41 p.m., Eleanor Hayes saw a pattern that had not happened yet. She did not realize it immediately. At first, it looked like noise. Small markings across the board she had drawn only minutes earlier. Points connected by relationships rather than events. Delays instead of reactions. Conditions instead of decisions. She had stopped mapping what the system did. She was mapping how it chose to do it. That was the difference. And that was when the mistake appeared. A line connected two points that should not have been related. Eleanor froze. Because those points did not exist at the same time. One belonged to a condition that had already formed. The other had not happened yet. Michael noticed the change in her posture. "What is it?" Eleanor did not answer. She stepped closer to the board. The line was faint. Barely visible. But it was there. She traced it slowly. "This doesn't make sense." Michael walked over. "What are you seeing?" Eleanor pointed. "This connection." Michael studied it. "That's just an extension of the pattern." Eleanor shook her head. "No, pause. That event hasn't happened yet." Silence. Because that was impossible. Patterns could reflect the past. They could suggest the future. But they could not connect to something that did not exist. Unless, the map was not based on events. Back in the control room, Daniel Kessler was studying the same anomaly from a different angle. He had begun logging delays. Every offset. Every timing shift. Every instance where the system responded not directly, but indirectly. He overlaid them. Across regions. Across systems. Across time. At first, it looked like a scattered distribution. Then, he saw it. A structure. Not a pattern. A structure. The analyst leaned closer. "What is that?" Daniel did not answer immediately. Because he was not sure how to describe it. "It's connected." The technician frowned. "Everything is connected." Daniel shook his head. "No, pause. Not like this." Because the connections did not follow sequence. They did not follow cause and effect. They did not follow time. Across the world, Eleanor stepped back from the board. Her voice dropped. "It's not mapping what happens." Michael looked at her. "Then what is it mapping?" Eleanor answered slowly. "What is going to matter?" That was the difference. Not events. Significance. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned toward him. "This shouldn't exist." He nodded. "No." Michael frowned. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor pointed at the board again. "These connections." Pause. "They're not based on time." Michael looked closer. Then his expression changed. Because she was right. The connections skipped. Jumped. Linked things that had no direct sequence. Events that had not happened yet. Conditions that had not formed. It was not a timeline. It was something else. Back in the control room, Daniel zoomed in on the structure. The delays formed intersections. Those intersections connected. Not linearly. Not predictably. But consistently. The analyst spoke quietly. "It looks like a map." Daniel nodded. "Yes." Pause. "But of what?" Because maps represent space. Or time. Or relationships. This represented something else entirely. Across the world, Eleanor whispered, "It's a map of decisions." Michael shook his head. "But those haven't happened yet." Eleanor answered, "That's why it shouldn't exist." The stranger spoke softly. "It exists because decisions are not created where you think they are." Silence filled the room. Because that meant something deeper. Back in the control room, Daniel overlaid one more layer. Historical data. Past decisions. Past outcomes. He aligned them with the structure. And then, he saw it. The past fit the map. Perfectly. Every major shift. Every unexpected outcome. Every moment where the system had changed direction. They all aligned with points on the structure. Points that had existed, before the events themselves. Daniel stepped back. That's not possible. The technician asked, "What is it?" Daniel answered slowly. "It's not tracking decisions." Pause. "It's tracking where decisions will matter." Across the world, Eleanor felt it clearly now. This was not prediction. It was positioning. The board in front of her was not showing the future. It was showing the structure that determined how the future would unfold. She spoke softly. "This is beneath the system." Michael looked at her. "What do you mean?" Eleanor answered, "This is what the system uses to decide." The stranger nodded. "Yes." Back in the control room, Daniel's voice dropped. "We're looking at the layer below choice." The analyst stepped back. "That doesn't make sense." Daniel answered, "It doesn't have to." Pause. "It just has to be real." Because the evidence was there. Clear. Consistent. Impossible, and undeniable. Across the world, Eleanor stepped forward again. She added another line to the board. Then another. The structure expanded. Not randomly. Not chaotically. With purpose. Michael watched. "That's not something you're creating." Eleanor shook her head. "No." Pause. "I'm uncovering it." The stranger spoke quietly. "You are seeing it." Eleanor looked at him. "What is it?" He answered calmly. "It is the map." Silence. Because that meant something irreversible. Back in the control room, Daniel stared at the structure. For the first time, he understood why nothing they did worked anymore. They had been acting on the surface. This was underneath. He spoke quietly. "This is where decisions come from." The technician asked, "Can we use it?" Daniel did not answer. Because the question was wrong. Across the world, Eleanor whispered, "We're not supposed to see this." Michael looked at her. "Why not?" Eleanor answered slowly. "Because if we understand this, pause. We stop reacting to the system. Pause. And start shaping what it will become." The stranger smiled faintly. "Yes. And that was why, the map should not exist. In forgotten places, where the structure beneath choice begins to reveal itself, where time no longer defines connection, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 12:49 p.m., Daniel Kessler made the decision that would define everything that followed. He chose to use the map. Not fully. Not recklessly. But intentionally. For 8 minutes after discovering the structure, he had done nothing. He had watched the intersections form, watched the lines connect across systems that had no obvious relationship, watched points appear where no events had yet occurred. It was not prediction. It was not simulation. It was something else. The map was showing where decisions would matter before those decisions were ever made. That was what made it dangerous. And that was what made it impossible to ignore. The analyst stood beside him, still studying the overlay. "If this is real," Daniel nodded. "It is." The technician added quietly, "Then we can get ahead of it." Daniel did not respond immediately. Because that was the instinct. To move first. To intervene before the system reached those points. To act before consequence formed. It was the same instinct that had driven every decision they had made so far. And every time, it had failed. He knew that. But knowing it did not remove the pressure. He looked at the map again. One point stood out. Not because it was brighter. Not because it was larger. Because it was close. A convergence forming within the next few minutes across a regional energy grid. Minor on its own. But connected to multiple lines. If it aligned with the structure, it would matter. The analyst followed his gaze. You see it too? Daniel nodded. Yes. The technician leaned forward. That's small. Daniel answered, not on this map. Because size no longer defined importance. Position did. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes had found the same point. She stood in front of her board, tracing the line with her finger. This one. Michael stepped closer. It's not even active yet. Eleanor nodded. I know. Pause. But it will be. The stranger stood behind them, silent. Eleanor turned slightly. If we intervene here, she did not finish the sentence. Because she did not know how it would end. Michael spoke what she was thinking. We might stop it before it starts. Eleanor did not answer. Because that was what they had believed before. Every time. Back in the control room, Daniel made the decision. Not to control. To test. He constructed a minimal intervention. Not designed to force an outcome. Not designed to optimize. Only to shift the condition slightly before the convergence point was reached. The technician watched carefully. That's subtle. Daniel nodded. It has to be. Pause. If the map is real, even a small change should matter. The analyst added, or it won't matter at all. Daniel executed the adjustment. The system registered it. And for a moment, nothing happened. The technician exhaled. That's normal. Daniel did not respond. He was not watching for immediate change. He was watching the timing. 3 seconds passed. 5. 8. The convergence point approached. Across the world, Eleanor felt it building. The pressure was not sharp. Not chaotic. It was forming. She spoke softly. It's about to happen. Michael nodded. I see it. Then, the system moved. The convergence occurred. But not where they expected. Not in the way the map had suggested. The adjustment Daniel had made did not prevent it. It did not redirect it. It changed something else. Back in the control room, the technician leaned forward sharply. That's not the same outcome. Daniel nodded slowly. No, the analyst asked, what did we change? Daniel stared at the display. Not the event. Pause. The timing. Because the convergence had not disappeared. It had shifted. Not forward. Not backward. Sideways. The system had resolved the imbalance in a different configuration. But the point on the map remained. Across the world, Eleanor stepped back. That didn't stop it. Michael frowned. No, Eleanor continued, it moved it. The stranger spoke quietly. Yes. Eleanor turned toward him. That's not what we tried to do. He nodded. No, pause. But it is what you did. Back in the control room, Daniel replayed the sequence. The map still showed the point. Even after the event had occurred. The analyst whispered, it's still there. Daniel nodded. Yes. Because the map had not changed. Even though the event had. That was the moment he understood. He spoke quietly. It's not mapping events. The technician asked, then what is it mapping? Daniel answered, inevitability. Silence filled the room. Because that changed everything. Across the world, Eleanor felt it too. The line on the board did not disappear. It did not move. It remained exactly where it had been. She spoke softly. It doesn't care what happens. Michael looked at her. Then what does it care about? Eleanor answered, that something happens there. Because the map was not showing outcomes. It was showing points where outcomes would matter. No matter how they tried to change them. Back in the control room, Daniel stepped back. We didn't prevent anything. The analyst nodded slowly. We just changed how it happened. Daniel added, and when? The technician asked, so what's the point of the map? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because the answer was not what they wanted. Across the world, Eleanor spoke quietly. It's not for control. Michael looked at her. Then what is it for? Eleanor answered, to show where we can't avoid consequence. The stranger nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel understood. The map did not give them power. It removed illusions. He spoke quietly. It shows where decisions will matter. Pause. But not how they will go. Because the outcome was still unknown. Still shaped by conditions. Still influenced by choices. But the point itself was fixed. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. She felt the structure now. Not as a pattern. Not as a prediction. As a framework. A set of positions where the system would always converge. No matter what they did. She opened her eyes. This is deeper than anything we've seen. Michael nodded. Yes. Because this was not something they could change. Only something they could encounter. The stranger spoke quietly. And now you understand the risk. Eleanor looked at him. What risk? He answered calmly. That you will try to change what cannot be changed. Silence. Because that was exactly what they had just done. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke again. If we use this map, pause. We're not controlling outcomes. Pause. We're stepping into them earlier. The analyst looked at him. That could make things worse. Daniel nodded. Yes. Because intervening before an event did not remove it. It altered how it unfolded. And sometimes, that made the consequences spread further. Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board again. The lines. The intersections. The points that had not yet happened. She spoke softly. This is not a tool. Michael asked, then what is it? Eleanor answered, it's a warning. The stranger nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel made one final observation. Every time they had tried to act before the system, they had accelerated something. Not stopped it. He spoke quietly. It doesn't let us get ahead. The technician asked, then what does it let us do? Daniel answered slowly. Arrive differently. Across the world, Eleanor felt the weight of that truth. They could not avoid the points on the map. They could not erase them. They could only influence how they arrived. And what happened when they did? She spoke softly. This is where decisions actually matter. Michael nodded. Yes. Because the map did not remove choice. It revealed where choice had weight. The stranger spoke quietly. And where it does not. In forgotten places, where inevitability replaces prediction, where the structure beneath events cannot be changed, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 12:58 p.m., Daniel Kessler stopped trying to prevent what was coming. For the first time since the system had begun to change, he accepted something completely. The map could not be altered. The points it revealed could not be erased. Every attempt to avoid them had failed. Every attempt to move around them had only shifted how they unfolded. But the points themselves remained. That realization removed a certain kind of fear. And replaced it with something more dangerous. Clarity. He spoke quietly. We're not trying to stop it anymore. The technician looked at him. Then what are we doing? Daniel answered, we're deciding how it happens. Silence followed. Because that was a different kind of responsibility. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes had reached the same conclusion. She stood in front of the board, looking at the intersection points not as threats, but as inevitabilities. This one, she said softly. Michael stepped closer. It's forming faster. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We don't have time to avoid it. Michael looked at her. So we guide it? Eleanor shook her head. No, pause. We shape how we enter it. The distinction mattered. Because they were no longer acting on the system. They were acting within it. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned toward him. If we do this right, she did not finish. Because she did not know what right meant anymore. The stranger answered quietly. You will still face the consequence. Pause. But you may change its form. Back in the control room, Daniel identified the next convergence point. Larger than the last. More connected. More significant. A multi-layered interaction between transportation, communication timing, and energy distribution across 3 major regions. The map showed it clearly. Lines converging. Not in time. In importance. The analyst stepped forward. That's going to cascade. Daniel nodded. Yes. The technician asked, can we contain it? Daniel answered, no, pause. But we can decide how it unfolds. Because now they understood the rules. They could not remove the point. But they could influence the path into it. He began constructing the sequence. Not a correction. Not a prevention. A preparation. He adjusted the conditions leading into the convergence. Small changes. Distributed. Timed. Not to eliminate pressure. To distribute it differently. The technician watched carefully. That's controlled. Daniel nodded. Yes. Pause. We're shaping the entry. The analyst added, if this works, Daniel finished, it won't look like the map. But he knew that was not true. It would still align. Just differently. Across the world, Eleanor moved quickly. She traced the same convergence on her board. Then began marking possible entry paths. Not outcomes. Paths. Michael watched her. You're doing the same thing. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We can't change where it happens. Pause. But we can change how it builds. The stranger spoke softly. And what it carries with it. That was the key. Because every convergence point was not just an event. It was a transfer. Of pressure. Of consequence. Of direction. Back in the control room, Daniel executed the preparation sequence. Not all at once. Staggered. Layered. Each adjustment designed to influence how the system would approach the point. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the system began to respond. Not directly to the adjustments. But to the conditions they created. The technician leaned forward. It's shifting. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst asked, is that good? Daniel answered slowly. We'll find out. Because this time, they were not stopping the event. They were shaping its approach. Across the world, Eleanor felt it clearly. The pressure was different. Not concentrated. Spread. The convergence still formed. But its edges were softer. Its structure less rigid. She spoke softly. It's working. Michael nodded. I see it. Because the system was not building toward a single point. It was distributing across multiple paths. The stranger remained silent. Watching. Back in the control room, Daniel monitored the final seconds before convergence. This was the moment. The point the map had shown. Unavoidable. Unchangeable. The technician held his breath. Here it comes. And then, the system reached it. The convergence occurred. But not like before. Not sharp. Not singular. It unfolded across multiple channels. A distributed resolution. Less intense. More controlled. The analyst stepped back. That's better. Daniel nodded. Yes. For the first time, they had influenced how a convergence unfolded. Not stopped it. But changed its shape. Across the world, Eleanor exhaled slowly. That reduced the impact. Michael nodded. Yes. Because the system had absorbed the convergence differently. The pressure had not disappeared. But it had not concentrated. The stranger spoke quietly. You have changed the form. Eleanor looked at him. That worked. He did not respond. Back in the control room, Daniel watched the aftermath. At first, everything seemed stable. No immediate cascade. No visible chain reaction. The technician smiled slightly. We did it. Daniel did not respond. He was watching the edges. Because the map had not been wrong. The point still mattered. The consequence still existed. It had only changed form. Then, the system moved again. Not at the convergence point. Beyond it. The analyst leaned forward. What is that? Daniel's voice dropped. It spread. Because the distributed resolution had not eliminated the energy. It had redistributed it. Across a wider area. Into more systems. Into more connections. Across the world, Eleanor felt it immediately. Her expression changed. That's not contained. Michael looked at the board. It's moving outward. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We reduced the impact, pause. And increased the reach. The realization settled heavily. Back in the control room, the technician spoke quietly. That's worse. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. Because before, the convergence had been intense but localized. Now, it was weaker but widespread. More systems affected. More connections engaged. More consequences unfolding. The analyst stepped back. So we didn't fix it. Daniel answered, no, pause. We changed the trade-off. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. The system moved across the network. Not violently. Not chaotically. But extensively. She spoke softly. We made it easier to absorb, pause. And harder to isolate. Michael nodded. Yes. Because now the consequence was everywhere. Not overwhelming. But persistent. The stranger spoke quietly. This is the cost. Eleanor looked at him. Cost of what? He answered calmly. Of choosing how to arrive. Silence filled the room. Because now they understood. The map did not give them control. It gave them responsibility. Every adjustment changed something. But never without consequence. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke quietly. We can shape it. Pause. But we can't reduce it. The technician asked, then what's the goal? Daniel answered slowly. To decide what kind of consequence we're willing to accept. Across the world, Eleanor opened her eyes. She looked at the board again. At the points. At the lines. At the inevitability of it all. She spoke softly. This is where choice actually matters. Michael nodded. Yes. Because now, every decision was not about avoiding outcome. It was about choosing its form. The stranger spoke quietly. And living with it. In forgotten places, where inevitability cannot be avoided but only reshaped, where every choice defines the form of consequence, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 1:12 p.m., the system was no longer their greatest problem. They were. The convergence they had shaped minutes earlier had not collapsed the system. It had not triggered a visible crisis. It had done something far more complex. It had spread consequence across a wider range of systems, reducing intensity while increasing reach. No alarms had sounded. No failures had occurred. And yet, everything had changed. Daniel Kessler stood in the control room, watching the aftermath ripple outward. The distributed adjustments were still resolving, still stabilizing, still interacting with systems that had not been directly involved before. The technician spoke quietly. It's everywhere now. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst added, but it's manageable. Daniel did not answer immediately. Because manageable depended on what they were trying to achieve. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes stood in front of her board, tracking the same spread. The lines she had drawn were no longer theoretical. They had expanded, connecting regions that had not been part of the original convergence. Michael looked at the board. It's less severe. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. But it's wider. That was the trade-off. And now, they had to choose which kind of consequence they could accept. The network channel opened. Voices from multiple locations began to report. Impact reduced locally. Spread detected across secondary systems. No critical failure. Ongoing adjustment required. Then the first disagreement appeared. Better this way. Contained intensity is more dangerous. Another voice responded. No. Spread increases long-term instability. A third added. Localized impact is easier to isolate. The channel filled quickly. Different perspectives. Different priorities. Different definitions of risk. Back in the control room, the technician looked at Daniel. They're arguing. Daniel nodded. I hear it. The analyst asked, which one is right? Daniel answered slowly, they both are. Because there was no correct answer anymore. Only different consequences. Across the world, Eleanor listened to the same discussion. Her expression remained calm, but her voice changed. We can't do this again. Michael looked at her. What do you mean? Eleanor pointed at the board. This spread. Pause. It reaches too far. Michael nodded. But the impact is lower. Eleanor answered, that doesn't mean it's safer. Because widespread consequence created complexity. And complexity was harder to control. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned toward him. We reduced the damage. He nodded. Yes. She continued, and increased the uncertainty. He nodded again. Yes. That was the cost. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke into the channel. We need to decide our priority. The responses came quickly. Reduce intensity. Reduce spread. Balance both. The analyst leaned toward him. We can't do all three. Daniel nodded. I know. Because the map had made that clear. Every choice shifted something. Nothing removed consequence entirely. Across the world, Eleanor spoke into the channel. We should contain the next one. Silence followed. Then, Daniel's voice. That increases local impact. Eleanor answered, yes. Pause. But it limits expansion. Daniel responded, and concentrates pressure. Eleanor did not hesitate. That's easier to manage. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, pause. That's easier to see. The difference mattered. Across the channel, others began to align with one side or the other. Containment advocates argued for reducing spread, keeping consequences localized even if intensity increased. Distribution advocates argued for reducing severity, even if it meant the effect reached more systems. Two philosophies. Two strategies. Both valid. Both incomplete. Back in the control room, the technician asked, "What do you think?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He was watching the system. Not what it was doing. How it was adapting to what they had already done. The spread was stabilizing. But not disappearing. It was integrating. Becoming part of the system's ongoing behavior. He spoke quietly. It's learning from this. The analyst nodded. Yes. Daniel continued, so whatever we choose next, pause. It will expect it. Across the world, Eleanor heard the same implication. She looked at the board. At the expanded lines. At the new connections that had formed. If they chose spread again, the system would adapt to that. If they chose containment, the system would adapt to that too. She spoke softly. We're not just choosing outcomes. Michael nodded. We're teaching it how to respond. That made the decision heavier. Because it was not just about the next event. It was about every event after that. The stranger spoke quietly. Yes. Eleanor looked at him. So there is no safe strategy. He answered calmly. There never was. Back in the control room, the channel grew louder. Arguments sharpened. Positions hardened. Some pushed for consistency. Choose one strategy and follow it. Others argued for flexibility. Adapt to each situation. The analyst spoke quietly. We're dividing. Daniel nodded. Yes. Because the system was no longer their only challenge. Their own disagreement had become a variable. Across the world, Eleanor spoke again. If we keep spreading impact, pause. We lose control of where it goes. Daniel responded, if we contain it, pause. We risk overwhelming a single point. Eleanor answered, that's a risk we can see. Daniel replied, and the other is not. Silence. Because both statements were true. The stranger stepped forward slightly. This is the decision you cannot avoid. Eleanor looked at him. What decision? He answered, what you are willing to allow. Back in the control room, Daniel understood. They were no longer choosing between right and wrong. They were choosing between different kinds of consequence. He spoke. Into the channel. We're not solving anything. Pause. We're shaping trade-offs. The room fell quieter. Because that was harder to argue with. Across the world, Eleanor lowered her voice. Then we need a rule. Michael looked at her. What kind of rule? Eleanor answered slowly. One we can live with. The stranger nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke again. We choose based on what we can manage after. The analyst frowned. That's not a technical answer. Daniel shook his head. No, pause. It's the only one that matters now. Because the system no longer followed simple logic. It responded to what they created. And they had to live inside that response. Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board. She erased nothing. Added nothing. She just looked. This is not about control anymore. Michael nodded. No, Eleanor continued, it's about responsibility. The stranger spoke quietly. And acceptance. Back in the control room, Daniel made a decision. Not about the system. About their approach. He spoke into the channel. We choose case by case. Some voices resisted. Others agreed. The debate did not end. But it shifted. Because there was no universal answer. Only context. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them. That's the only way. Michael nodded. Yes. Because the map had not simplified their choices. It had made them more complex. Every point required judgment. Not just action. The stranger watched them both. You are learning. Eleanor asked, learning what? He answered calmly, how to decide when nothing is simple. In forgotten places, where even those who understand the system cannot agree on what to do, where every choice defines a different future, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 1:26 p.m., the system presented them with a convergence they could not debate. It was too large. Too connected. Too immediate. And for the first time since they had discovered the map, the decision could not wait. Daniel Kessler saw it first. A major convergence forming across multiple sectors at once. Transportation routing, communication timing, energy distribution, and emergency coordination systems all intersecting within a narrow window of less than 2 minutes. The map showed it clearly. Multiple lines collapsing toward a single point. Not because the systems were failing. Because they were aligning. The technician's voice tightened. That's not like the others. Daniel nodded. No. The analyst stepped forward. That's bigger. Daniel did not respond immediately. Because scale was no longer the only concern. Connection was. And this was deeply connected. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes felt it at the same moment. The pressure was different. Not distributed. Not forming gradually. It was converging. Fast. She stepped toward the board. This one is different. Michael looked at the structure. It's collapsing inward. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We don't have time to shape it slowly. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. Eleanor turned toward him. This is where we have to choose. He nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, the network channel opened again. Reports came in rapidly. Convergence accelerating. Multiple systems involved. Time window shrinking. The debate began instantly. Contain it. Spread it. Reduce intensity. Limit reach. The same arguments. But now, there was no time to argue. Daniel spoke into the channel. We decide now. Silence followed. Because everyone understood. This was not theoretical anymore. This was immediate. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them. We contain it. Michael looked at her. You're sure? Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We keep it small. Back in the control room, Daniel heard her. He hesitated. Because containment meant concentration. And concentration meant risk. He spoke into the channel. That will increase intensity. Eleanor responded immediately. Yes. Pause. But we can manage it. Daniel looked at the map again. At the lines converging. At the weight of it. Then he made the decision. We contain. The technician moved quickly. What's the plan? Daniel answered, we compress the approach. Instead of distributing pressure across systems, they would narrow it. Limit the number of pathways. Reduce the spread before the convergence occurred. It would make the point sharper. But smaller. Across the world, Eleanor began the same process. She adjusted conditions leading into the convergence. Not to reduce it. To focus it. Michael watched her. That's going to spike. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. But only there. The stranger spoke quietly. And only for a moment. Back in the control room, Daniel executed the sequence. Fast. Precise. Every adjustment aimed at directing the convergence into a confined space. The system responded. Not directly. But through the conditions they created. The technician watched the display. It's tightening. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst added, spread is decreasing. Daniel kept watching. Because now the question was not whether. It worked. It was what it would cost. Across the world, Eleanor felt it intensify. The pressure was no longer spread. It was focused. She spoke softly. It's building. Michael nodded. I see it. Because the system was no longer distributing energy. It was accumulating it. The stranger remained still. Watching. Back in the control room, the convergence point approached. Seconds. Less than a minute. The technician whispered, this is it. Daniel did not respond. He was watching the edge. Because the edge defined everything. Then, the system reached the point. The convergence occurred. This time, it did not spread. It did not distribute. It did not soften. It concentrated. A sharp, localized resolution. Fast. Intense. Contained. The analyst exhaled. It held. Daniel nodded. Yes. Across the world, Eleanor stepped back. That worked. Michael nodded. It's contained. For a moment, everything was still. No outward spread. No expansion. No secondary effects. The decision had worked. They had chosen containment. And it had held. Then, the system moved again. Not outward. Not immediately. But deeper. Back in the control room, Daniel saw it first. That's not finished. The technician leaned forward. What is that? Daniel's voice dropped. It didn't release. Because the pressure had not disappeared. It had not spread. It had not dissipated. It had gone somewhere else. Across the world, Eleanor felt it instantly. Her expression changed. That's wrong. Michael looked at her. What? Eleanor pointed at the board. It's still there. The convergence point had resolved. But the structure around it had not changed. The lines remained. The connections held. The map was unchanged. She whispered, it didn't remove anything. The stranger spoke softly. It never does. Back in the control room, Daniel understood. Containment had not eliminated the consequence. It had compressed it. The analyst spoke carefully. So where did it go? Daniel answered slowly. Deeper. Because the system had absorbed the convergence into a layer they could not see directly. No spread. No visible aftermath. But not gone. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. Trying to feel it. Not outward. Inward. She opened them. It's still in the system. Michael frowned. But where? Eleanor answered, we're not looking at that layer yet. The stranger nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel stepped back. They had chosen containment. They had succeeded. And yet, nothing had been removed. He spoke quietly. The map didn't change. The technician looked at him. What does that mean? Daniel answered, it doesn't care what we choose. Because the points remained. The structure remained. The inevitability remained. Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board. Every line. Every connection. Every point. Unchanged. She spoke softly. This is not about outcomes. Michael nodded. No, Eleanor continued, it's about structure. Because the map did not track events. It tracked something deeper. Something that could not be altered by any decision they made. The stranger spoke quietly. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel understood the final implication. They were not changing the system. They were moving within it. He spoke quietly. We're choosing how we experience it. The analyst asked, then what's the point of choosing? Daniel answered slowly. Because it still matters to us. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes one more time. Then opened them. This is not control. Michael nodded. No, Eleanor continued, this is participation. The stranger smiled faintly. Yes. In forgotten places, where even the right decision cannot change what must happen, where choice defines experience but not structure, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. You have been listening to whispers of reckoning. They believed the map would give them control. Then they believed it would give them warning. But in the end, they discovered something far more difficult to accept. The map did not care what they chose. It only showed where choice would matter. And what comes next would not be about changing the system. It would be about understanding who was shaping it.